welcome back, and we are shifting gears now as we are joined of a Belizean author about to launch her new book called Belizean Storytime, and the book is being launched in conjunction with Niche, specifically the Institute for Social and Cultural Research. Right. So we have on set with us Giovanni Pinelo and author Sherlett Lopez. Good morning.
Hi,
welcome.
Good morning, Marlene. Good morning, my good friend. Good morning, Belize.
You know, it's nice to have you guys in the studio, and we were during the break talking about some of these these folklore that we've been hearing about as kids. Tata the Wende and he myself. So sure, what brought you into it? What put you to want to launch a book or want to even write about stories?
I love writing to start off with. I love the arts. Many years ago, I wrote a story called Anansi Jr. Yes, and I wrote.
And Nancy wasn't scary enough. He needed a junior.
He needed a junior. He wasn't lazy enough to do that junior.
I should say, yeah.
And so I did this story in September. They used to have these storytelling competitions.
Yes.
And I wrote this story particularly for that. That was like almost 5 years ago. And that was the launch pad to write the other stories. And so once I had them, I thought, you know what, I should go ahead and put them in a compilation. Yeah. Besides the fact that I have a 5-year-old, and when she asked me to read her a story, the only thing I find is Snow White and Rapunzel. You know, and I keep remembering growing up to story time.
Yeah.
And they were exciting times for families, and you know, so for me it's really very, very sentimental writing these stories, and I'm excited to see where they will go and how it will add to that richness and trying to bring back what I know to be some great storytelling family time.
Amazing how we have lost touch with Belizean folklore. And of course, this is obviously, I'd imagine, one of the reasons why Niche jumped on board with this project, an opportunity to be able to educate our younger generation about the folklore that we grew up with.
Precisely. With the intangible cultural heritage aspect of our peoples, of our nation, and Niche being the primary vehicle for the expressive arts, then once we learned about Ms. Sherlett's efforts at this, our colleagues who are directly responsible for that literary section made an evaluation, and of course it ties right into what Belize is. Yeah. And so having a book and being a co-sponsor in this effort is something that makes us, you know, be proud to cooperate with Sherlett. And we know that there are other people in the country who have similar goals. I was, if I may, just yesterday a teacher was requesting, you know, do we have these storytellings? Yes, we hear stories on Saturdays on the radio, but do we have more of these?
Yeah.
And so here's another opportunity then that arises.
You know, I remember there used to be storytelling competitions, and there used to be reading competitions. In fact, as a child, I can remember that I used to practice nonstop for reading competitions, and it had to be local stories. Is this still something that is happening within the school systems? As far as you know?
As far as you know, yes.
Okay.
And in fact, my daughter had participated in one a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
Of course, the standard 6 child will normally have an advantage. But it does happen. Storytelling is still alive throughout the whole country. I'm fortunate enough to go through to all areas of the country and meet people from the different ethnic backgrounds and listen to their stories. Some of them have actually agreed to be recorded, both audio and in visual, in video, to get the stories out. So the effort that Sherlett brings in by putting her stories together, and as she was explaining, stories from childhood and from her own creativity, is what we find to be a component that we cannot let go.
Exactly. It is true, because when I think of my childhood, I think of all these stories.
Of course.
And you know, growing up in these extended families, and seriously, and if you could tell a story, you get coconut with sugar on it. And that was like, come on, something to look forward to, you know. And so I think there are a lot of stories out there, but it's the effort to bring them together that will add to that. When I listen to Love FM, sometimes I'm listening. Why am I still listening to George McKee's story?
He's a hit home.
And you know, I'm like, we need to do something about this. And so for me, collaborating with Niche was more of me seeing where Niche can take this to places where I cannot. It wasn't more about. It was more about that, you know, that effort to make it a national publication rather than a Sherlett Neil Lopez publication.
So it's a compilation of stories that have existed.
No, these are all original short stories.
From out of your mind, you thought these up and you...
I did.
With our traditional Belizean folklore characters.
Folklore characters, exactly.
I have to point this out. Did you know Brian Nancy had a hurricane plan? Like, I love that.
I want to hear
He's better than a lot of Belizeans.
He does have a hurricane plan, but like true Brian Nancy, his hurricane plan hinges on somebody else's plan. So it's like those relatives who just show up.
Supplies.
Of course. Relatives to show up without food.
And there are a lot of people with the same mindset as you who definitely, because one of the things I notice about us Belizean is that we've got a creative mind. We say a lot of things in our head, but you know, it's hard to even to try and put them on paper because we don't know where we'll end up or how we'll stand.
Exactly.
But you actually found a platform where you could go. Now, from the point of Niche, how do we get out, or how do we reach out? And I think one of the scary part of putting things together is the reception that we get from the platform. So what's this reception like?
Well, the book is still to be launched, but overall, we often are in communities where people ask questions. People know the storytellers in their community. And we know that this is an avenue that has not been fully explored in our country. As was mentioned earlier, we rely a lot more on these new characters, the Disney and so on, and that detachment from what we really grew up with and the values that are taught. Because in a story, and teachers especially in the field of academia can make so much use of these stories to keep on promoting who we are as individuals. I mean, the story with the banana. How do bananas grow? There are other aspects of life in Belize that is not, you can't just put it out there in its simplicity. But within the text, it's there for perpetuity. So for us at Niche, for us at ISCR in particular, this type of work, and we know that there are other individuals who have similar goals, similar objectives, becomes a critical way of collaborating.
You know, it's very great to see that you support the efforts of a Belizean author, and it's very great to see a Belizean author who, in fact, this is a project we should have been doing a long time ago.
I totally agree.
It is amazing how many of our children, now youth, don't know about Bra Nancy, don't know about Tata Duende. We were joking during the break. He was the perpetrator in my nightmares. You know, I safeguarded my thumbs. And there used to be books with images, and you know, they're in my mind, and I think of it. And so I want to ask, when you're putting together these stories, were there specific messages that you wanted to be able to deliver, or was it to be able to ensure that the characters would live on?
It was a mixture of both. It was getting those characters back to life again, and it was some morals as well. For example, one of my favorite one was Today for me, tomorrow for you. And it had to do with Anansi and this bunch of banana that he asked Miss Maisie, who was old and crippled, to sell for her promising to come back, and they would share the proceeds. And of course, Anansi absconded, thinking Miss Maisie could never catch up with him. She was old, and she didn't get her wrong. But this story took an interesting twist, and he ended up in front of Miss Maisie again, asking for her to defend him because he was accused of stealing this banana from somebody else. And so Miss Maisie really said, no, it was not my banana. At the end of the day, why would I even trust you, Anansi?
And Nancy was a tricky character.
He was tricky. And sometimes he ended up tricking his own self. His own self, and ending up in trouble.
Yeah.
But that did not stop him from his many attempts. Yeah. So it was an effort to do both, getting the characters out there.
The stories are primarily based around Anansi.
Not all of them.
Okay.
For example,
the mountain cow.
How did the mountain cow become the national animal of Belize? And I put my own spin on it, of course, because at the end of the day, it was like, how rarely did we choose the tapir as the national animal?
Yeah.
I still don't know. Yeah. But years from now, this is what people will be saying. And that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
How the lion became the king of the jungle.
Your imagination, when there is a void or imagination fills the gap.
Fills the gap.
Yeah.
And so I remember running the stories by our esteemed Governor General, who writes himself.
Yes.
And he says, well, they're akin to folklore. And I tend to disagree with him a bit. I was like, let's ask this question 10 years from now and see if these are not folklore, because they will become. And that's how all of these Anansi stories and other stories like Tata Dohen, they made it into our folklore. Definitely. Somebody started telling them.
Or La Llorona.
And nobody.
That was the wild warning to men.
None of us questioned where they originated. We just said, this is how I knew it from the time I was growing up, and this is how it is.
It hits home for me because back in the 80s, listening to these stories, we were always taught that you need to close the door at 6, or you need to be at home at a certain time because La Sucia is out there. And you don't want to meet La Sucia.
Exactly.
So stuff like that. But Belizean story time is definitely a way for parents to actually captivate again their children from the gadgets now that we've got.
Most definitely.
It brings a smile to the face. It brings an imagination to a child listening to what was it like then. So this is definitely something that we could, that people should put their hands on. Where can they get it?
Okay, well, this book will be launched on Wednesday at the UB Auditorium from 10 until midday, thereabout. I really want to thank the president of the university, Professor Sankat. When I approached him, he did not hesitate. He said, that's what the university is here for. Yeah. And that for me was a really resounding statement. These books will be available from me personally. They will be at Niche, and they will be at most of the bookstores in Belize.
And the launch will have some live storytelling.
Yes, I'm working with some of the schools, and I've asked them to select 2 of the very short stories and ask them to please come and actually act out these stories at the launch.
Even better.
I will also have some audio recordings of at least one of these stories narrated by myself that I'll be presenting at the launch. As a follow-up to this as well, as we have been discussing with, and I really, really want to applaud Mr. Encalada. He sat with me for about 15 minutes, and thereafter it took on a life of its own. He was like, yes, this is something we want to do. And I told him, I said, I want to get these stories on CDs as well and get them out there on the airwaves, in the schools. And he was very supportive of it, and actually suggested that we collaborate with other storytellers and do a compilation of Belizean stories for that audio.
Giovanni, there was the book, the caricatures and folklore of Belize, or there was that talked about all these different characters. One of the things I think perhaps that is worthwhile mentioning is why it's important that we have our own folklore that represents our Belizean culture.
Indeed. Like I said, I insist. We've had stories being told to us, In schools, we read about other characters, but we have our own. As an auditory society, as an oral society, we oftentimes only listen to these stories, but putting them in writing then provides an opportunity for a longer term transmission and across generations. Because in our communities, even to this day, different people do have these stories. In fact, that compilation, I recall reading it many years ago. I haven't seen an edition in a good while. But by the same token, we've had people like David Ruiz, who has written from the mestizo perspective of those folklore characters in Spanish. And I mean, you recall Érase una vez, those folk stories from the area around Benque, with La Ishtabay, La Llorona. And again, we see these folk characters across our societies.
Yeah.
So the effort then has to, you know, you can't just let it go.
Yeah.
This is part of the Belizean identity.
Yeah.
No matter if you are up north in Corozal or way down in PG, wherever we are, the stories go across. And very importantly, this aspect of our intangible cultural heritage, the values that are taught, the behavior characteristics, the attitudes of our people. And it takes a stories like these, that can then be used to transmit these messages, these important ideas, these concepts of what our society, not only what it was like, but what it can be like. You know, in this time and age, with technology bombarding us, with the different negative events occurring in and around, it's always good to know that there's some level of sanity, both in listening to the stories orally as well as in reading. So for Niche, then this opportunity is one of those that we look forward to having more.
And it's great to see that people are interested in maintaining this folklore. You know, so this is such a great initiative, Sherlett. Have you tested them out on children to see how they react?
Oh, I have actually. In 2014, with the help of my friends at Print Belize, Lawrence Nicholas and his wife Rose, who's actually my relative, I published some copies, and they were widely received. People love the stories, and what I like about it is the diversity in age.
Yeah.
You can read this to a small child, an adult can pick this book up. So there's no, because the question I always get is, what is the target audience? And I say, everybody and anybody.
I want to read it. I haven't read an answer story in so long, and he was hilarious.
I will make sure you get a copy, Marlene. At the time, my son was studying in Trinidad, and I had him get a few copies, and he was like, Mom, you need to get me some more copies of this. Everybody wants it. And Trinidad has nothing to do with the Belizean reality. And so the fact that it's a Caribbean thing is really something I'm looking forward to.
And I think that is part of what you were speaking about with our unique cultural identity. You know, if we know Anansi and we know what he stands for, we can be in any part of the world, and only another Belizean will understand what it means if they call you, you're like Anansi, right?
Exactly.
And I think it's part of the pride that we must have. So this is, I'm so happy to hear. I wish, I can't wait to be able to share it with the children in my family so they can be able to know and have the same nightmares that I had.
Exactly.
Well, this one doesn't have Tata Duende, but it does
no,
have
it doesn't.
Anansi.
But Belizean Storytime 2, TOO, will have some of those stories. I'm already working on that to have a second publication.
And it always comes to mind, while Tata Duende is all over this country on the mainland.
Not anymore, he died, but go ahead.
Hold on, while he's on the mainland, along with La Ishtabay or La Llorona, I wonder which one of the son, Pedro.
Oh,
it comes to mind.
Tata Duende was afraid of water. I'm thinking along that line for my next story.
Used to hang out by the water, by the river, right?
Actually, under the ceiba tree.
There you go.
Under the cotton tree.
Under the cotton
So
tree.
if you have cotton trees out there in the islands,
I don't think it was to scare people away from the country. I think it was to keep the husbands at home and from out late drinking. Remember?
Yes.
Because she only was it La Llorona who
La
only
Llorona.
used to trap up. Ishtabai used to trap the
Ishtabai,
drunken men.
yes.
You see, all these stories still ring true. But I can't wait till we're talking about Anansi and his Valentine's Day and Anansi Tong. What seems to be the favorite one from the book so far? One that stands out?
The one that stands out for the kids was the same one with how the tapir became the national animal. They also loved the one with Miss Maisie and the bunch of bananas. My favorite was Anansi going to church, because Anansi actually went to church. For the wrong reasons, of course. For the wrong reasons, for free food. But he ended up trapping himself again. So everybody will find that they have their favorite. The ones that I find are more favorite are the humorous one that brings a smile to your face. And so it's more relaxed reading. It's reading for enjoyment, and that's why it's for all ages.
And if you were wondering, of course, Anansi's best friend, Bra Tiger, is still very prominent.
Very prominent, and so is Bra Leo. He's also very prominent in those stories.
This sounds like so much fun.
See, no matter what, these folklore characters will. They will live. You can't get rid of them.
Yeah.
No.
They are part of who we are. So imagine the day when we can have Sherlett and Miss Myrna and David and others in this country, you know.
I could imagine.
Sharing their stories with young people.
That day is not far away, Mr. Pinelo. That's something you can
we certainly are looking forward to that. And we encourage other people throughout the country. Put pen to paper. Let's write these stories because they are valuable in and of themselves. So for us at Niche, then it's been, you know, it's one of the ways that we see how we fulfill our mandate to ensure that the Belizean identity, literary, orally, written, historically, in whatever way, shape, or form it takes, it's necessary for us to be collaborating and hopefully. There's more to come in this day and age with technology, with, you know, there are other things that can be done with the stories. Our schools have so much to benefit and so on. So it's a pleasure, you know, for us to cooperate in this way.
So the book will be launched next week, Wednesday, and after that it will be available for sale through Niche and also at all the major bookstore outlets. Sherlett, great job. Of course, I'm sure you're grateful to Niche for the partnership, definitely keeping in theme with keeping our culture alive through folklore, and I'm excited to read it as well. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Marlene. Can I just again thank Niche very much, Mr. Encalada. Keep up the good work of being receptive. The Sign Factory, Mr. Frank Madrid from the Sign Factory, my friends at Print Belize, of course the UB president, Professor Sankat, thank you so much. The Belmopan City Council, as well as Honorable Julius Espat. Thank you guys so much for opening your ears and listening to what I had to present and being a part of this initiative.
Excellent.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. We're going to go ahead and take a break, and we'll be back for a final wrap-up. So stay tuned.